and thank you all for participating. I also thank the Taiwan Ministry of Culture while they are in Taipei and NSS in Nepal for their kind support for my trip in Nepal this time. And special thanks to Professor Shin Anta and Ashmina Ranjit for their kind arrangement and contact. It is an honor and privilege for a young scholar like me to have this opportunity to share my research at Martin Chattery. Okay. So the major subject of my research is identity politics. It is also a significant issue in contemporary Nepal. My research mainly uses Taiwan as a study case, which could be rather remote from Nepalese society. Besides, when I sometimes discuss the political issues here with people of Nepal, I found it's very difficult to apply conventional Western theories to explain Nepalese condition, especially when the diversity in ethnicity and the complexity in caste systems are concerned. However, since the main task of my research is to debunk conventional theories of identity and to develop a new theoretical framework, maybe my exploration could be helpful to explain the current situations, and indeed longing for more exchange after my presentation. So my research starts from my critiques of contemporary theories on identity, particularly those in the vein of the postmodernism. Like many contested ideas in social science, the conceptualization of the identity has its postmodernist term, with its goal being to challenge the Cartesian tradition that simplifies identity as a fixed, rigid, solid, or atomic construct. In this paradigm, identity is described as dynamic, positional, hybrid, and power-related. Yet, the adjectives proposed by postmodernist theorists, such as multiple, hybrid, mercurial, and so on, are in fact ascribed in reference to Cartesian descriptions of singular, fixed, rigid self-identity. In other words, identity is still comprehended as an absolute, rigid, and exclusive concept. It can be imagined as a being combined and making a hybrid, but it cannot be further dismantled or reduced. This essentialist view goes into several presumptions. First, defining national identity by the observed feature of that type of identity falls into the problem of tautology. Further, treating national identity as a singular, rigid, solid, and atomic entity also have the problem of presuming that everyone must possess a national identity or ethnic identity and must be subjected to its mobilization. Third, defining identity mainly by one's social role or one's in-group cannot explain atypical identity patterns or counter-identity behavior, which I use to describe the unconventional situation when people support a group or movement that conflicts with their own background. Theories in this vein thus offer little explanation on diverse response to the interpolation of national identity in reality, or on how identity might change. The approaches based on the binary thinking are criticized for their incapacity of adequately speaking to the direct challenges that emerge from vast disparities and unequal globalization. Current struggles and resistance, such as the Arab Spring, the Occupy Wall Street movement, and other protests cannot be reduced to concerns about cultural or religious difference or nationalism. So my research aims to continue this kind of a completed project by probing into the Chinese and Taiwanese identities in contemporary Taiwanese society. So this is a very brief introduction of Taiwan's modern history. So in 1945, the Chinese government, KMT, took over Taiwan from Japan. That's the time when the World War II ended. So, and after 4 years, the KMT was defeated in the Chinese Civil War. So the KMT lost the mainland and settled down on Taiwan. At the same time, the KMT government brought 1.2 million Chinese diaspora also migrated to Taiwan, which occupied 20% of the population at the time of Taiwan. But this Chinese diaspora we also call it 外省人, speaking different languages. They speak Mandarin, but native Taiwanese people speak Taiwanese language or Japanese at that time. And these two groups have very different life experience because the native Taiwanese people was colonized by Japanese. So at that time, because the KNT, the Chinese government, was in power, so 外省人, the Chinese diaspora, they were politically and culturally dominate the society, which some theories would say that it's a settler colonialism. But around the 1970s, there's a huge political reforms happening in Taiwan. So it's the rise of the Taiwanese nationalism. And this movement is related to another political party, which is Democratic Progressive Party, called the DPP. It was the major opponent of the KNT party. So this table is kind of important. So basically, I'm talking about two ethnic groups. One is Chinese diaspora, which is called 外省人. 外省人 also means that people from other province. And the other side is native Taiwanese. They have been in Taiwan for many years, hundreds of years. And they also call themselves as 本省人, which means people in the local province. So the 外省人 occupied around 20% population. Native Taiwanese is around 60% of the population right now, which is a majority in the society. And 外省人 speak Mandarin mainly, and 本省人 speaking Taiwanese language. And 外省人 is kind of a politically and culturally dominant society. But on the other hand, 本省人 native Taiwanese is politically and culturally subordinated. So we can see how this kind of identity shifts in Taiwan. Because Chinese diaspora is related to Taiwan, so they promote, the KNT government strongly promotes the Chinese nationalism, and they are very eager to make Taiwanese people to be a Chinese identity, a Chinese subject. But however, as I said, after 1970s, there's a huge political reform and social movements going on, and we can see how Taiwanese nationalism and the Taiwanese identities has increased very sharply. And on the other hand, this one.
Excuse me.
Okay. And this one is the Chinese identity. The number of people who claim the Chinese identity is decreased very sharply. Okay. So that's the current situation in Taiwan. And so it does mean that this kind of still there is 1/3 of population.
Last one.
There's still 1/3 of the populations in Taiwan who they think themselves as both Chinese and Taiwanese. So this kind of a situation means that the conventional theories on national identities cannot explain Taiwan's situation. There must be other social discourse operating behind people's identity formation. So that's the purpose of my research. And for the methodology, I mainly use two methods. One is in-depth interview to collect data, and the other one is ground theory developed by the Schwartz and Corbin, which assists me to explore and to identify the social discourse behind the identity formations. But I think I shall skip this part to save time for the following discussion. But totally 108 interviews I have collected in Taiwanese society. So that's a brief introduction. Okay. So with the analytical technique of ground theory, investigating the 108 interviews, this research identified 3 influential discourses playing significant roles in contributing the formations of Taiwanese people's Chinese and Taiwanese identities. So the first is ethical narrative, a discourse that narrates dualistic antagonism between the good people and the bad people. So here I use Haoping as a case to illustrate how an ethical narrative that I call East and West antagonism contributes to his Chinese identity formation. So Haoping is a native Taiwanese, but he would identify himself as Chinese. He would not manifest his Chinese identity when meeting foreigners because he thinks he would be misperceived as a citizen of the PRC, the People's Republic of China. So in other words, in his everyday life, Haoping is indeed lacking occasions to invoke his Chinese identity. However, there's one particular opportunity for him to claim Chinese identity in a scenario that is purely hypothetical, a scenario harking back to the age of imperialism when the West utilized its superior power over the late Qing dynasty in China and early Republic China. So Haoping specified this in his interview. Okay. So I asked, is there any occasion on which you will claim that you are Chinese? Haoping answered, at present, when we are invaded by foreigners, how should I describe it that? Let me think for a moment. And I say, you mean when being bullied? And he replied, yeah, when we have to defend ourselves from outside enemies. Why don't you say you are Taiwanese at this time? And he replies, the feelings are very different. We should develop Chinese solidarity. I ask, do you mean that Taiwanese are not united? And he replies, it might be a little bit strange, but it should be that when mainland China and we all together are against enemy from outside, I would be proud of being Chinese, not Taiwanese. That is, we are together holding certain Chinese characteristics and the spirit to fight against foreigners' invasions. And I keep asking, are we being invaded right now? And he replied, no, it was a long time ago. The 8 Nation Alliance period is a time around 90,000. Okay, so currently there seems to be no such occasion for you to say that you are Chinese. And Haoping said, no, there's no at present. So Haoping identified himself as Chinese only in a fictional situation, a narrative with his background set in China during the 19th and early 20th centuries, when the Qing Emperor was suffering from the invasion of the Western imperialists. So he formulated his Chinese identity only when he sees the threat from outside enemies, and these enemies are fictionally imagined to be Western imperialists. More clearly, Haoping claimed Chinese identity only when he wishes to contrast himself to Westerners. His Chinese identity is based on the conceptual dualism between Easterners and Westerners, or more precisely, on the moral dualism of an East-West antagonist narrative, in which Chinese people, Easterners, are good guys, whilst the Western imperialist powers are the opposite. Okay. So in addition to this discourse, my fieldwork research has also revealed other forms of ethical narratives that also utilize the antagonist dualistic structure, and that also exercising influence on the formation of people's Chinese and Taiwanese identities. They are China-Taiwan antagonism, the fight between China and Taiwan at this moment, and anti-Vaisheng or anti-KNT narrative, which describe either the Vaisheng ethnic group or the KNT as the oppressor bullying the Bensheng group or Taiwanese people. And there's an anti-DPP narrative, which the DPP party is the villains. So next, the second influential discourse is cultural hierarchy, an evaluative system that endorses identity-related objects and ideas such as ethnic group, nation, language, etc., with certain social cultural values. This comparative discourse usually draws people who very much care about their social images and status. Such people tend to seek an identity with higher values. For instance, my research observes a whole cultural hierarchy in Taiwan that regards Mandarin and its speakers are more cultured, civilized, and graceful than Taiwanese languages. So because Chinese identity in Taiwan is often associated with Mandarin, this evaluative system of languages attracts some Bensheng native Taiwanese people to claim Chinese identity. And here is another case of my fieldwork, Mei Chu. She is a native Taiwanese elder who was born in the Japanese period. And one obvious tendency of Mei Chu that can be observed in her interview is her particular preference for the individual culture, such as education, erudition, civility, politeness, and taste, tidiness, ordinance, and so on. So the discussion of the relative merit of the Japanese and the KNT administration reveals this kind of attribute of hers. So I ask, do you think the KNT or the Japanese government is better? Which is better? And Mei Chu replies, the KNT looked disorganized when they came to Taiwan. After the 8 years war, civil war, the war against Japan, everything seems in disarray. Therefore, when Japan was defeated and China came to Taiwan, when we Taiwanese people saw the Chinese army, we thought, how could these soldiers look like this? It's so messy. And we felt very disappointed. And I keep asking, disappointed with what? Mei Chu answered, the army was totally disorganized. They were much worse than the Japanese army. They gave us a very poor impression. We expect them to be very tidy, orderly, and very organized. But on the contrary, they camped along the roadside and threw their luggage everywhere. When we were ruled by the Japanese, we had seen how tidy and dignified the Japanese army was, while the Chinese soldiers were scruffy and rumpled. So Mei Chu gave the Japanese army much higher marks than the Chinese army, and she made her evaluation based on the criteria as ordinance and tidiness. There is clearly a cultural hierarchy functioning here. To Mei Chu, Japanese army is given higher cultural value and has better image than Chinese troops. A similar logic of the cultural hierarchy appears once again in her comparison between the KMT and the DPP. So I asked, do you prefer the KMT or the DPP? Mei Chu answered, in my opinion, the KMT seems better. Who will you vote for this presidential election? She asked me, and I answered, I've not decided yet who will vote for. Mei Chu answered, I always vote for the KNT. I'm not like those who don't know whom to vote for. That's not good. Those who vote for the DPP are useless. Have they not watched what has been reported on the television? That woman is just as corrupt as Chen Shui-bian. The woman means the current President Tsai Ing-wen. is the current president of Taiwan. So wait and see. The KMT is more honest. The DPP is good at running campaigns and good at blaming others. Would you please vote for the KMT? And I replied, since when have you supported the KMT? Meiju said, a very long time ago, I looked down on the DPP. Their spokesmen and representatives are unscrupulous. Our family has always supported the KMT. We have not changed. Do you think the KMT is good? And Meiju answered, the KMT is pretty good. Look at those KMT members sitting there politely and in a well-mannered fashion. They are not like those in the DPP who talk nonsense and are babbling all the time. You will know if you watch the television. So once again, Meiju endorsed the KMT with her constant support and dislikeness the DPP, because she perceived people in the KMT as better mannered than those in the DPP, and these attributes indicate to her that KMT has more ability to maintain order and control. Her evaluation of the two parties is not based on actual administrative performance or achievements, but on the perceived personal behavior and qualities of the party members. With these fundamental images, Meiju will always be willing to give more credit to the KMT, and as a result, to welcome its relevant discourse, including Chinese identity and the future unification with China. So there's also another cultural hierarchy observed in my research. In addition to Mandarin versus Taiwanese language, there's also Taiwan's, which means ROC, versus Chinese PRC, which means that Taiwan is more cultural, more high class, and on the other hand, the Chinese people are less cultured and low class. So this kind of a cultural hierarchy and perception and social image influence people when they format their identities. So the last influential discourse is political ideology, which is defined as a fairly coherent and comprehensive set of ideas that explains and evaluates social conditions, helps people understand their place in society, and provide a program for social and political action. For example, socialism, liberalism, conservatism, etc. Okay. So the influence from political ideology upon one's formation of Chinese and Taiwanese identity is indirectly mediated by one's party images. For example, a conservative person can endorse the KMT party with constant support because she or he believes that the party is more conservative than the DPP. With this party affiliation, this person also fosters the discourse that the KMT promotes, including the Chinese nationalism and Chinese identity. So in Taiwanese society, the KMT is generally associated with conservatism and neoliberalism, not only because its long period of governance gives the KMT the image of a capable ruling party, but also because Taiwan's economy had a big boost in its administration during 1970s and 1980s. By contrast, the DPP is generally associated more with liberalism and socialism because it has the image of challenging the KMT's long dictatorship and bringing democracy to the society. Also, because of the limit of time, I do not illustrate interview report here. So I'm going to just kind of a conclusion here. So by further comparing and analyzing this social discourse, there emerge a crucial elements that shared by all these type of discourse, that is value. In this course of ethical narrative operates the moral values. When falsely marking the division between the good and the bad, the dualistic antagonism indeed propose a strong moral obligation for its audience to act and to support the good side. Second, the discourse of cultural hierarchy certainly has the most obvious characteristics of evaluation at the social-cultural aspect. Political ideology, by its definition, involves not only the belief of, but also the decision about what values should be prioritized as the main goal of the state. Conservatism puts primary emphasis on the maintenance of the social security, stability, and traditions. Liberalism focuses on the freedom and human rights. Socialism prioritizes social equality and redistribution. Value is the common theme of these three types of influential discourses, and therefore is a crucial factor to re-theorize the concept of identity. So this essay, my research, therefore proposes a theory of treating identity as a discourse of value. A discourse of value refers to a statement or a set of statements that involves evaluation, judgment, and definition of good and bad, virtue and evil, and favor and disfavor. Deeming identity as discourse of value means dismantling identity and emptying this concept. Identity becomes an empty field, which, with its basic shell as a neutral, generic idea. Only when being associated with other discourse of value, the idea can acquire its symbolic power and obtain an identity full function, such as provoking people's feelings and mobilize people to take action. In other words, identity itself does not automatically bring emotions or power of mobilization. It is the value attached to that identity possessing this capacity. So treating identity as a discourse of value resolves the debate on how identity can mobilize people's actions and arouse people's emotions. And moreover, the deeming of identification as a battle of value debunks the Cartesian view of identity. It allows for individuals to avoid, to reject, or at least reflect the identity that others ascribe to them, be it national, ethnic, gender, or caste as identity, or other forms of social category. Although resistance to ascribed identity does not always translate into rejection, this theoretical construct opens up a space in which to discuss, describe, and explain the individual struggle with identity. So why identity politics fails sometimes? So according to this theory, identity politics can fail when an antagonistic structure that can meaningfully and rightfully describing the current operations cannot be formed. Second, it fails when a subordinate group cannot represent the values that most of its members wish to pursue. Third, it fails when a member of a subordinate ethnic group supports the discourse, beliefs, values, ideologies, and identities produced by the dominant group. So if we take the ethnic politics in Nepal, it's not as successful as expected. So this theory of regarding identity as value discourse then prompts us to further deliberate. It is because the power relationships are so complicated in the caste system that it is difficult to identify a dominant class that should take the major responsibility for the oppressions in the society. Is there a generic idea? It could be an ethnic name or maybe not. For the oppressing class, caste blaming, chattery, could could that be a proper ethnic narrative, ethical narrative be formulated in the name of this generic concept? Or is it because the mainstream evaluate system is so powerful that people lack of commensurate discursive resources to challenge the dominant class? Or modern values such as liberty, equality, human rights, and so on have not become mainstream yet in the society? Or there lacks a common value or common goal for different ethnic groups to gather together to cooperate and to fight against their common enemy and to fight for their common interests? Well, I don't have the answer yet, but I hope this theory of dimming identity as discourse of value may offer a new as well as a constructive angle to explore these questions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.